Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. I'm not gay. So this video is about a video I saw on YouTube about Jewish women discussing things with Christian women. And one of the things they brought up was the idea of objectivity, right? Objective reality, which is something I bring up quite often in my videos, right? People have to agree that the sky is blue at face value, as they say, that the person there was wearing whatever color clothes they were wearing at the time. To kind of get anywhere in a religious discussion, whether you're having a debate or a discussion or you're in church or what have you, right? So you have to have a kind of logical interpretation. Believe it or not, this has to be said. We live in a time where people interpret things in a way that is insane, and they uphold social norms instead of being obvious about the interpretation of things. Another thing that was brought up in the same discussion was the argument that Christians try to be perfect, or that they're supposed to try to be perfect. And the Jewish lady had said that according to her, the Jews don't have a conception of that they don't believe that perfection is attainable or that one can be perfect. And this is very significant, okay, because it goes back to the New Age and how it's really corrupted the different groups on the planet, including the church. People all behave like that Jewish female is right, and not like, they don't behave in a way that reflects that they understand something that I understood since I was a kid. When I was a kid, I believed in God like I do now. In fact, I know that there's a God. I also knew that one has to try with all their heart to be good to make it to heaven. I knew that since a child. And I went to school with some Christian kids, and they said things like that, though we didn't talk about Christianity that much, but that was one of the things that was brought up, and I was like, yeah, I agree, right? There's a God. You have to try hard to go to heaven. I get that. And people would say things like, if you're good, you go up. If you're evil, you go down. So you have to try to be good, right? Because there's temptations in life, and you get angry, right? And I understood that people get emotional, and they make mistakes, and some people stay in a very angry state of mind their whole life, or a very sad state of mind, or very greedy, or whatever. To me, it was the most obvious thing in the world. Before I heard of the greatest commandment and the golden rule, I knew that that's what you're supposed to do. Before I read Matthew 5 and I zoomed in on it, I knew that that was what you were supposed to do. For the most part, growing up, I didn't go to church. I didn't watch Christian TV shows or cartoons. I didn't know much about what was in the Bible. But I knew that when we're talking about objective reality, I knew two things right away. One has to try with all their heart to be good. Two, that anyone who didn't believe that there's a God and who used that lack of belief in God, that lack of faith in God and injustice to misbehave, to argue that they're somehow justified to misbehave or they have no reason to care, was an idiot. Let me give an example. If somebody pulled out a gun on somebody, and the person who pulled out the gun was a very serious looking person, very angry looking person, the type of person you think would pull the trigger, and they said to somebody to give them, their water or whatever, okay, if that person said to that person, well, I don't believe you're going to pull that trigger, so I'm not going to do that. And the person has, say, $5 in their wallet, you would think that person is an idiot, right? If you figured out that that's what happened, so on and so forth, say, why the hell did you just risk your life for no reason? Even if they survive, even if they live through it, and the person just walks away. And so it is with the agnostic and the atheist. When they look at the situation, there is an overwhelming amount of evidence that there's a God. Even the fact that there's an ozone layer, the odds that life live under these particular that exist under these particular circumstances, the fact that people have a drive for a meaning in life. Right? This is something that's not limited to monotheistic people. People are looking for the point in life, to fulfill their purpose, what have you. It's a common theme. It's a common belief. It's a common activity. And there's so many things to point to the idea that there's a God. When you run a race, almost always there's one winner, right? One person. You have one father who's the head of the household historically in the vast majority of families, historically. There's one sun, one moon, one earth. Okay, now there's other suns for other solar systems, but I mean in the solar system, it's a pattern of nature. If two people fight to the death, almost certainly there's one winner. That tends to be the trend. And there's other things that point to this idea as well. Why would there be a divided council of gods with a little g instead of one God who is in charge? So when we look at it in terms of objective reality, that's clearly the case. Now keep in mind the people in the discussion, they're all wrong. How do I know they're all wrong? Because they're all wittingly or otherwise cheating me out of my right to lead. And quite often when people are wrong, they don't necessarily know that they're wrong. They don't know what they're doing wrong or what they're thinking that's wrong that makes it so they're wrong. And when you look at these situations, you know that these people, they don't have a certain divine authority. They have a very Freemasonic-like authority at times. They have very worldly authority. Very, they seem like they come from the government or the intelligence apparatus, what have you. And so you just know right away. And that's part of the objective reality that they're ignoring. In reality, not only are they clearly wrong, but they're clearly not believable. Nonetheless, they can say things that are interesting and helpful and so on and so forth and make an example of themselves, wittingly or otherwise. That's part of the objective reality. If you were God and you knew that many people die for many reasons, people have sacrificed themselves for their families, for their country, for their religion. People have done selfless things. Would you let somebody who believes that there's an all-powerful God who empowers them to do things, get away with not putting God first and not being ready to die for God at the drop of a hat? Part of objective reality is objective reason, is logical reason, is sound reason, it's deductive reasoning. So when we do a thorough analysis and we ask ourselves, what's doing a good job? It's like the parable of the two sons, I think it's called here, where one of them said he was going to go do the work in the vineyard and didn't. And the other one said that he wasn't going to do the work in the vineyard and did. It was logic that helped us realize, that helps the viewer realize, the reader, what have you, that the one who actually did the work is the one who honored his father. It's the one who did what he's supposed to do. So when it comes to my arguments in regards to the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order, it's like that. The two sons. There's Chukwuemeka, which is my name. And when I was younger, I didn't go to church. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So in a sense, by my actions, I said that I was going to serve God, but I wasn't going to serve God to a T per se, because it seemed too complicated to figure out how to do that, because there's this big Bible and there's people who dedicate their lives to looking into it and so on and so forth. So, it's confusing, right? But the whole time, by my actions, I was doing just that. As I got older, I started serving God better, what have you. Where all these people in these churches and mosques and synagogues and all these different groups, they're praying together, they're pretending that they're doing something, they're quote-unquote preaching the gospel, they're quote-unquote prophesying, and so on and so forth. But they're actually not doing God's work. They're not doing what is objectively the work of God, which is seeking and speeding the cause of righteousness and justice. They're so far gone from doing God justice that they won't even do me justice, the most righteous person that ever lived. That they're distinctly different from me. It says, be perfect like your heavenly Father is perfect. What would Jesus do? What would I do? Would I cheat me out of my right to lead? No. Would I put things before God? No. I would live and die for God in the divine order. There's nothing the government could say, or any secret society could say, or anyone who has collateral could say. You people aren't doing what I would do, because you don't serve God. And this is why they say things like no one is perfect, because they don't want to scramble to be perfect. They want to indulge in narcissism and hedonism and greed instead.